Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon area. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about tonight. And my guest this evening, again and again and again, is Jimmy Moglia. Jimmy Moglia. And through the years, we've been having him on periodically because iron rusts, times change, and he always has some new refreshing thoughts or ideas about the reality of what's going on and what has come up in his mind. And as I was saying, I'm still learning stuff, and I'm checking you to see how much you've learned since the last time you were on the show.
I'll try. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me first. It's always a pleasure.
It's always
a pleasure. But for you,
the problem with you is there's always something newer stuff. You never stop learning. Examples, you're brilliant. And you always get mad when I say that, but you are.
Yes, because, as I always say to my friends, I am addicted to what is utterly, totally, and incontrovertibly useless. So
it's going to be that kind of an evening, folks, or morning or afternoon, whatever.
Therefore, part of this addiction or passion is the search or investigation of subjects that are left out of the mainstream for one reason or another. So I'm looking into the crannies, into the crannies of what is left untouched.
There's nothing left untouched with you in the world. All right. Now, the first part of the show will probably not go too long because there's always so much that you can talk about that's very interesting, and I'm not exaggerating at all. But first, a few repeat questions because there's something important that you're going to say in this first part of the show, which is called the bio segment. If I were to ask your best friend, who is Jimmy? What would your best friend say? Jimmy is what?
A person who is addicted to what is utterly, totally, and incontrovertibly useless.
You already said that.
Yes, but I repeat it because you asked me who is Jimmy, and I gave you a sober and accurate definition.
You don't have a religious preference anymore? You never did, as far as I know.
No, but I respect all religion, most of them.
Uh-huh. What did you do in your work life?
So much time now has passed since I took a Rubicon-type decision about 6 or 7 years ago to stop what I was doing professionally, because by profession I was trained as an engineer, and during my first half of what may be called, I don't know if I can measure the half of life, but anyway, during my first half of my quote-unquote professional life, I worked as an engineer, and my first job was with a corporation, with a large corporation at the time. Here in Portland, those are the ones who hired me. And that job was very interesting because I worked out of Europe, out of a small island called Guernsey, which is in the Channel Islands. And but my quote-unquote territory was Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. So that gave me quite a good opportunity, because I was working, to see directly, to have with an unbiased perception of what life was in these countries, especially in the Middle East. And then when I came back, when I left that company, I founded mine, which was a computer company, which I ran for a good part of 25 years. And then at that point I said, that's enough, maybe I ought to do something else. If the gods will allow me, will extend by some whatever unpredictable length of time.
And what did you do after that?
And then I decided to become a writer, which is one of the most I would say, not crazy, but the most unpredictable things to do, because you don't know whether you can write a lot, but you can never be sure that anybody reads it, which still qualifies.
You have with you a book that you wrote, among other books.
That was my first book.
Okay.
And my first was the digestion, or rather, it conveys the type of frustration which accumulated in corporate life. But it has nothing to do with corporation. It has to do with literature and with one of my many platonic passions that I developed through my life, which is the works of Shakespeare. So
The works of who?
William Shakespeare.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure my viewers heard that.
And but what I did, I was searching for a way of locating good quotations to use in everyday life or during presentations, or even in writing at times. I have in my diary successes of how a little quotation in a commercial letter did what otherwise I would not be able to do, at least in my opinion. And such dictionary did not exist. And after 400 and odd years of Shakespearean universal experience, there was no dictionary like this one, because all Shakespearean dictionaries of quotation, of which there are very many, list the quotes play by play. So you need to know beforehand where to find in which play is the quote that you may wish to use. But instead, this particular dictionary lists the quote by situation. So if I want to deal with an accountant, I want to deal with a girlfriend, a lover, a nasty lover, a good lover, a friendly lover. For example, I'm just quoting, going into the subject of love because it's universal.
It's an encyclopedic.
It's an and so and there is a analytic dictionary that has more than 10,000 entries, and so it is very likely that the situation that you wish to apply a quotation to is listed in the analytical index. From the analytical index, it refers you to the main quote that reflects that particular subject or idea that you wish to convey, as well as cross-reference to quotes with a similar meaning or similar significance, but with a slightly different nuance.
For those who want to carry a thought to its
conclusion. Yes. Yeah, that's the idea. So this one did not exist. So I was almost, quote unquote, forced to read, which is a silly thing to say, but I have precedent. A much more famous, influential, and legendary literary subject. When I always travel, I never travel without my diary because I want to have something exceptional to read in the train. And so this is not that, but it is very something to carry, something to use on the desk.
It's a good paperweight, isn't it?
As I say, exactly. So if you cannot use it as a book, you can always doubles as a paperweight. It's about almost 4 pounds. But paperback, so you can imagine if it were not paperback, it would be even higher.
So this illustrates what you were doing a good part of your life.
Yes.
Doing your research and being stimulated by Shakespeare and what he was about.
Yes, because it's a condensation of life in poetical terms. It's almost a universal psychologist. People go to the psychiatrist to find out what is wrong with their mind, but you can find it well explained.
Why is it you have such a fascination for someone like Shakespeare?
This answer will be extended for the length of the show, but
okay.
there is a correlation. There is a strong correlation between words, meaning, the sound of words, aesthetics, and understanding and memory. All these are
and other things that we can't quite define.
Can't quite define. So, because he is the distillate of what is best in the English language, that is yes. So that was a place to start.
How about Chairman Mao or one of those people?
I will not go into politics because I was recently an internet witness to a debate which did not involve me, but members of a fairly popular blog site to which I contributed with articles. And they are loggerheaded, insulting each other because one said you cannot have a democratic dictatorship, and the other one said, oh yes, we can have a democratic dictatorship, which is a contradiction in term. And they started almost insulting each other. So, but you ask me about Chairman Mao, I will not go into details. However,
I don't blame you.
as you know, one of the things that I've been doing now for the last 4 years, almost four
Yes.
plus, I produce videos in the same studio here
Yes.
for that are broadcast here, various stations in the nation, and some colleges that pick them up, and so. And so through that activity, I have produced videos on the history of Ukraine, on the biography of Stalin, who's a very interesting figure. So I didn't do Mao because I don't know Chinese, and it's a foreign culture to
You know
me.
everything else.
I believe anything provided it is quite incredible. So, but
Yes.
but returning to the theme here, so this to me is a distillate of Western thought, at least is the way I see it.
Yes. Yes.
Distillate of Western thought.
So what have you been doing recently?
Okay, I thought that
And then we're going to leave this and go to something.
yeah, I thought to change slightly from the subject from the previous shows. One of the good things about Shakespeare, sounds almost a platitude, as I said before, is to be able to every now and then to recall a quotation by heart, which is not just to be and not to be. Most people know to be and not to be, and that's it. But that's easier said than done. And so I searched for several ways of finding way to remember quotations without having to look at the book, without having to do away with my book. So in the context of that, I did a video and did some research on the history of memory. Memory is one of the things, one of the assets that most of us have, on which fortunately we don't pay any taxes, at least that's yet. I know, but
It's coming.
It's coming, I'm pretty sure. And but anyway, apart from other silly jokes, of course, memory is a very important asset that we all have, and I strongly believe that memory is like a muscle. And if you're very fit, and so, because you exercise, I'm pretty sure. And so, just as we exercise the body in order to, hopefully, with the help of the gods, to remain as fit as we can, the same thing applies to the memory. So I wouldn't call it a dramatic, revolutionary discovery, but the method of what I call the application, which is called the mnemonic frames, has enabled me and others, because to develop a pretty good knowledge by heart of Shakespearean quotation. I have created these frames for almost 500 quotes, but I could not put in 500 tonight.
You need to say a couple of words about mnemonic frames.
Mnemonics.
Thank you. Illustrate my ignorance.
Mnemosine was the muse, one of the 9 muses, was the nine muses of memory. She was the muse of memory. So they put the muse of poetry, the muse of music, the muse of memory. So it was a mnemosine. And she was one of the 9. And so everything that has to do with memory comes from the Greek root mnem, which is memory. So the mnemonic frames are frames. I'll show you an example if the crew will cooperate of very, very, very short examples of how they work. My application essentially enables people quite easily to create or use already existing mnemonic frames that I have made, but it's even better if they make them for themselves. It reflects the psychological connection with the images. I'll show you with an example, then I will.
Who would be interested in that degree of examination and discourse with another? There seems a whole strange sort of a sect. Are you part of a sect in this Shakespeare?
I'm sectless. I'm a sectless person.
Please carry on. I can't outwit you.
I was almost at the point of saying sectless, but I did not mean that. Sectless, the sectless. No,
okay, please continue.
What I meant to say, the reason the people should be interested in is the people in education, and I'm here not to pontificate on education because I'm the last person, at least title-wise, authorized to do so. But if you instill a measure of aesthetics in the process of learning, even scientific subjects do not become so heavy and so difficult to understand. And the point of my very intuitive, so I'm not claiming to saying anything new, but I'll give you an example. is that if an educator of whatever level can instill in his whatever he teaches something that inspires, it has an element of aesthetics in it, the difficulty is greater and greater. I try to contact the university. I had even a meeting, I will not mention names, with the head of the Portland University. I said, yeah, this is very interesting. I will talk to my subordinates, but I never spoke with any subordinates because, you know, if you are outside of the circle, you're part of the reverse censorships. Who are you?
And we'll be talking about that later, won't we?
So we will talk about censorship, which is the main theme of the show. But I don't want to take it too long. So let me ask the crew, if I may, to put on slide number 1, which is one of the simplest one. I decided there. If you put it on.
Here it comes.
Okay, well, this was slide number 2, but that doesn't matter. That's fine. Oh, this is the one. This is a very simple one. So those were my salad days when I was green in judgment. Okay.
Oh, God.
So when we all make mistakes when you're young. At least I made quite a few. So Cleopatra says, those were my salad days when I was green in judgment, she says in Antony and Cleopatra. That's very intuitive. You have a salad, you have a green, and you have the Last Judgment by Michelangelo. This is because it's magnified. But you look at this, you don't have to remember. I could not condense here the experience if you go through the class or course for a month, because it has to come here. But after a while, you look at this and the words come into you. Go to the next one, please. This one is, may I never, to this good purpose that so fairly show, dream of impediment. Okay, so May, in this case, is the month of May. Never. I also use fonts because the fonts are almost like images when they are special fonts. May I never, to this good purpose that so fairly shows, here's the theater, dream, Martin Luther King, of impediment. That's an obstacle. May I never, to this good purpose that so fairly shows, dream of impediment. Now, you may disbelieve this because I have no other way to prove it, but the same thing works for another almost 500 that I created. So even after a while, when you don't exercise yourself, of course, nobody is perfect, so sometimes what I call them the synapses, or whatever, the connections between the various cells of the brain become loose. But the image itself is such a powerful reminder, a concentrate of the concept. And so in my application, I show people how to derive obtain, use the images that best reflect their psychological reaction to the particular turn of phrase, and so forth.
So why would that be so interesting, where enough people would embrace the kind of thinking you're talking about now, such that it's an ongoing part of the culture?
Absolutely. Well,
I amuse you sometimes.
No, you're amusing. No, I was laughing at this because, as I said, I'm addicted to uselessness. But last summer, it's a very short anecdotal, then we go to the last view. Last summer, I went to see the eclipse in the Painted Hills in Central Oregon.
Yes.
And as I was driving up the night before, as you know, on the plateau on the top, there are hundreds and hundreds of wind turbines, windmills, I still call them. I said, okay, well, because when I see a windmill, I immediately think of Don Quixote, you know, the guy, which is very close to my heart. So I thought, well, I would like to. I never took a selfies of myself. I don't care, but I want to take a selfie of me with the wind turbine. But of course, it's too big for it. It's incredible. They're
tiny.
Huge. They're huge. But anyway, then I said, well, I couldn't stop a car. So could you mind take a selfie? The guy said, maybe the driver think this guy is mad. But as I was walking back to the car, I said, well, that's exactly me. That's exactly me with the system. So turning back to your point, yes, it would be very useful. I have proven I have made some experiment in schools, all on my own, you know, no financing or things like this. But to break through the system is a physical impossibility, because if you try something that is either new, the first in the system, I'll call it system, not to say imply capitalism or anything else. In the system of extreme competition, I am a competitor. Now this, I am a competitor. You are a competitor. We are friends, so we don't see each other as competitors. But in the system, the complex or the idea of competition is so strong that the immediate reaction, unless there is a thread in the mind that says yes, I can see a utility for me at some stage, the reaction is no. So I don't care. I'm very glad that what I've done, because it makes me, I like to exercise the memory anyway. And people who buy my book, they are corresponding with me, and I'm very pleased when somebody from Mongolia says, I've learned you. True. I've said
Do you have a following?
Yes, it's not big because people follow on my website what I've written about it. So with the videos too. So I don't have many, because it takes a certain frame of mind to think about it. Where should I really remember quotations by heart? But
Yes.
people who understand, or rather realize, not everybody understands it, but realize inwardly that memory can be greatly helped by an exercise which is not boring. See, the idea is to have exercises which are not boring. When you make yourself an image, it is my image. It is my reflection of my thoughts around this particular group of words, which in this case are Shakespeare, but that applies for everyone.
Have you made a guesstimate as to how many synapses are involved in what you're talking about?
The anatomy of the brain is totally foreign to me, and I have no idea. But I'm sure that there are, because the more you try to do this, I find, at least that's been my experience, the more at times ideas come to the mind, reflections, memories come to the mind of things that I would never have thought of having been able to remember, nor I solicited them. So there must be some strange mechanism in the mind that probably no one has yet found, whereby it's an immense storage system, and where nothing is lost. And this way is a way of managing that storage system.
What you're saying suggests to me that thinking should be a primary consideration in Homo sapiens being and experiencing life. Or what about some other aspect of human being, feelings, for example?
I understand the question, but in which context? What are you asking me? I'm sorry. What are you specifically asking?
I can have my mind and my brain and my thinking involved in what we're talking about, and it seems to me there's a separate part of me as a human being that is registered biologically or physically in terms of feelings. So there's something more than just using my brain.
Well, yes, I had to talk to the brain and the memory as a separate subject, but there is no question that the DNA, the DNA, I'm pretty sure it has a contribution to it. The way where one is born, the first language that he learned, the type of first impression that he had from his parents, the type of nurturing that he had from his family, the type of experience he had with his friends, all of this contribute to whatever are his feelings. But I was concentrating on this because this is a very specific aspect of what I've been working on.
You are utterly amazing, my friend.
I keep repeating, I believe anything, provided it is quite incredible. But let me ask the crew, go to the last. It's a 10 seconds or 15 seconds video.
Sure.
If there is no audio, I'll tell you. But if there is audio, it is me speaking. But there is a lengthy quotation. You know, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, crisps this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of the recorded time, and all our yesterdays, etc., etc. But the mnemonic frame here shows the animation of how the structure between the words and the images goes through. If you can do that video,
Let's
please.
do it.
Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Anyway, thank you.
Yeah. So, shall we continue
Yes,
on,
let's
take a break, and then we'll talk about
the subject of the day.
other thing. We'll be talking about myth, freedom of speech, and censorship. And it seems like we're going to need 3 days to cover these subjects, but let's take a break, okay? Yes, so now we are back, and thanks for staying tuned. I hope you enjoyed those first few minutes that we've had here talking about stuff with Jimmy, my guest. It's always good to be with you again. For your viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like Jimmy Moria, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And we're talking about myth, freedom of speech, and censorship. And let's get started. I got a couple of questions that might stimulate the conversation and get us going.
Right.
It seems censorship has been on your mind and in your thinking for some time now, and for a long time anyhow, as it has in mine. And let's talk a little about that. What is formal censorship, Jimmy?
Censorship was very easy. What we are not allowed to speak, and
what you're not allowed to speak.
speak about, and whom too. And it's a very complex, not complex in terms of understanding. It's a very intricate subject in terms of all the aspects that come into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it can summarize it, to find out who rules over you, find out whom you cannot criticize. So, and so the censorship, which we all know is now in play in the internet, particularly.
In the internet,
the
censorship
world.
Worldwide too?
Oh yes, even more so in Europe.
Okay.
And I know that because I'm in contact. I'm part of a couple of groups, 2 groups in
and
Europe.
you're multilingual.
I don't know whether it's a praise or a discourage. But anyway, yes. So I can see that because from the conversation, okay, my site has been flagged as non-appropriate, and
who would do that to your site?
Google, Facebook.
Would they be exercising censorship?
On mine, so
Yeah.
far they haven't, because I'm neutral. But no, I'm not neutral. However, the sites that claim or say that they have been found inappropriate are more heavily involved in the political issue. For example, one in Italy I'm aware of were a couple of sites that attempt to convince, which is almost an impossible task, to remove Italy from NATO, particularly because in Sicily there is a huge U.S. radar station that they want to they want even to expand. And this is a very nice little town, famous for its orange groves, because the Sicilian oranges have always been notoriously good. And anyway, they have these huge antennas beamed towards Africa, but because of the system that the radar works, they use the reflections on this from the clouds or whatever they do. But because of the distance, the antennae are very, very large, so people are concerned about the radiations. And they've been fighting this battle for a long time, and they have not won. I'm just using an example, but recently there have been cases where people who had these sites or these blogs that were anti-NATO, quote unquote, they've been they've been censored.
I think you said they were political. Censorship is usually political. Is that what you said?
Yes. Well, there is political and ideological censorship. Both. They're both quite politics and ideology are sisters. But so, yeah, you can distinguish one from the other. But mostly it's political issue with tinges of ideology. So, as I mentioned when we were talking about there's various types of censorship, there is also another type which is called reverse censorship.
Reverse censorship?
Reverse censorship is the type of censorship whereby if you talk about a subject, you must only praise it. And if you don't praise it, you're automatically out. And I don't want to be... one of the subjects at heart to me is the question, and too many, is the issue of the Palestinians. So, because the issue of the Palestinians with Israel, the war in the wars in the Middle East, etc. So, if you cannot say anything, if you speak about Israel, you must only say good things about Israel. If you say bad things about Israel, it's not going to be too good for you. So that I call it the type of reverse censorship. Is that
successful censorship that you're talking about right now? Talking about Israel?
It depends on how you measure it, because if the measurement is one whereby if you talk, if your site or if your blog is blocked or censored or shut, or the site is shut down because you said something against Israel, then I would say that is very relevant. Or if you say something against the wars in Syria, or if you say Syria has a right to be its own state, why is it being invaded? That is an indirect offense towards Israel.
With that example of censorship, when you're talking about Israel and matters like that, who benefits from that kind of censorship?
Israel.
Are you an anti-Semite?
There you are. That is one of the. I don't remember the list. If you go over the steps of reverse censorship and you say something which may be interpreted as quote unquote pro-Palestinian, hence pro-Palestinian means anti-Israeli by definition, then you are an anti-Semite, even if you have no idea of being an anti-Semite. So in fact, I'm glad you brought it up. It's not secret that in various countries in Europe, people have gone to jail for saying something that is against the grain. And even in Italy, in this case, there was somebody some time ago said wanted to propose a legislation whereby to suggest this divest and boycott, as you know, that movement that wanted to promote a strike against buying Israeli goods, that would constitute an act of anti-Semitism. So that is an example of.
Well, then who decides whether it's anti-Semitism or not? It's censorship, right?
It's absolute censorship, but it's bad and it's good and bad at the same time, because until the advent of this relatively, now it's 20 years or whatever, technology, the only way to influence public opinion was still practically the same way as in the late 1700s. It is true that it was television, but television is controlled by a very powerful network of people who do not allow a different point of view on television.
So there is a powerful network of people involved
in censorship. Oh yeah, absolutely. The question is, the reason why it is not so widespread, the knowledge about censorship, is only because most of people either work for their life or have no interest in, say, in politics because they're quote-unquote disgusted by it, or they don't trust anyone, or a number of too many concurrent stimuli are at play with everybody in life, so they don't have much time to follow. So they follow the news, and the news gives only one side of the picture, even if the side is absolutely wrong. For example, an example is the Russia influence on the U.S. election. It's laughable because.
To you it's laughable, but to some people.
Oh no! But the people in power, the people who have started this myth. They benefit from it because it's the only at the moment, it's the only, I would say, tool, arm, weapon, ideological weapon that they can use, even if it is ridiculous. I'm saying it is ridiculous because in a recent, relatively recent statistics, you have to believe them if they are true, but only 6% of the American populace knows where is Ukraine. And Ukraine was part of Russia, of course.
Yes.
So, which suggests the interest on what goes on in the old Soviet Union or Russia or Ukraine or Poland, everyone else, is marginal, to say the least. So to imagine that someone may have heard from, who knows, from Putin is absurd, it's unbelievable, but that is sort of reverse censorship too.
Overall, are you left, right, or center on the political continuum? Where do you stand?
I will probably be damned by all. No, it's true. Because the point is, at least it's my opinion anyway, the more everyone gets involved and has the time or the stamina to find out what all the various points of view are on an issue, or even the biography of people. For example, I made the biography of Stalin. You came out with different, from various sources, not only from Stalin's girlfriend, just from various sources. You come back with an impression which, blended with the impression that I had of the Soviet Union, makes it totally different, in my view, which is natural. It's totally different because it's mine. My impressions are mine exclusively. And so I cannot pretend that my impressions are the truth. But
what about your impression today about the Soviet Union? Is it different than it was, say, 40, 50 years ago?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I'll try to be concise, which for me is not always easy.
Oh, it's so easy for you.
I visited the Soviet Union first when I was about 19, 20, so when I was very young. Mm-hmm. And my impression was positive. My first job, I was a musician. It doesn't matter.
See, how many lives have you had?
Anyway, so I visited the Soviet Union, and because of my frame of mind at the time, I did like the idea that people were not very showy. You don't have to show yourself off. I never liked it too much. You have to pretend that you are better than or more rich than the next guy. I did not get that impression at all in Russia, in the Soviet Union. There were still less things that maybe less that one could buy at the time than you could have in Europe. But on the other hand, people seemed to be content, quote unquote. That was my impression. Of course, really? I was in a resort, like at the time Ukraine was part of the USSR, so it was in the Crimea. There were people strolling on the beach and things like that, with families, with children. So then, in my second stage in Russia was when I was working for the corporation that was part of my territory. So I participated to exhibitions electronic exhibitions in Moscow, and again I was favorably impressed because I was not looking for McDonald's, because I'm a vegetarian anyway. I wasn't looking for fancy restaurants, although the eating was good. I wasn't looking for luxury. If I did not look for luxury, I think it was an excellent place. How much of censorship there were, I suspected it was gradually being removed. There was still, I remember that one evening I was invited to a party in a private house, and I was told by the guests not to make too much noise, not to make the neighbors not to be conspicuous for your neighbors, maybe some fear that there may be some political repercussion. That's the only thing that I could see, that it was some kind of censorship, if you like, not censorship in this type. Mm-hmm. So my impression was pretty good. But there is a difference between the USSR after 1917, when they killed the Tsar and they killed the family in a horrible way, and the bloodbath everywhere. And gradually it changed. Unfortunately, there was a World War II, and then gradually it changed. So from the 50 onwards, after just at the end of Stalin era, and afterwards it gradually relaxed. They relaxed even the censorship on the religion, which was not entirely active. The propaganda here was stronger than actually it was, because people were not forbidden to use churches. There was in Moscow there is a beautiful building called the Ministry of Religion. It's huge. It's huge, but it has to be understood. The still is. The USSR was 11 time zones, right? 80 republics, countless religion and sub-religions, and so in order to maintain some kind of coordination of which holidays was where and how many mosques were here and how many whatever temples of Buddha were somewhere else, you needed to have some central coordination, and that was the function of the Ministry of Religion. Now, with the relaxation of the quote-unquote old Soviet mode, they tried to prompt again, not to actually almost encourage the presence of the Orthodox religion, not so much for religion, but because probably the intelligentsia, for lack of a better word, understood that religion has a very important place in the soul of man, even if the man may not believe it entirely. So that was not so censored as it has been portrayed here.
Was the Soviet Union at that time appreciated more by the ordinary citizen than it is nowadays?
You mean in the world or at large?
And their personal life and experience.
As I said before,
the okayness of their existence.
As I said before, my perception, I do not want to impose it on others. That was my perception.
That's what I'm asking about, your perception.
It is possible that if I had been as I usually, quote unquote, mental militant, and had earlier on expressed my views as strongly as I may express them now, I may have ended up in a gulag myself. He had been there. Don't speak Russian, unfortunately. Yes. But so I cannot say, though that was beautiful, and that was bad. And that, in my opinion, is the difficulty in establishing a conversation sometimes about values, because people use frames of reference and say, this is my myth, so I cannot go away by the myth. If I go away from the myth, then all my theoretical structure of society crumbles in me, so you are the enemy, I am the friend. I can see it. I can see even among what I define clearly intelligent people. They have the myth, and they don't want to leave the myth. If you criticize the myth, you end up with reverse censorship. You only have to say good things, otherwise you're out. So to answer your question, there were some good things in the Soviet Union. There was no widespread poverty. There was no homelessness that I saw. And it was regimented. Probably I would have ended up in prison myself. So as I say, I cannot say, oh, it's wonderful. And that's, in my opinion, my mistake to say, oh, it was wonderful. Or I'm going to say even something more censurable. Censurable, yes. Even Hitler did some very good things for Germany. And but if you say, oh, did you say Hitler? It's good things for Germany? You must be a Nazi. So, and this is type of myth and mythology that continues in the so-called discourse or conversation, which is not very fruitful to find solutions, and solutions to whatever the problems are perceived during the day, and also feeds the machine at the top. They laugh about everyone else.
So there has always been censorship, as long as humans are together.
Yes. But as I said, until the internet, the censorship that existed in past times was minimal, because people had no way of expressing themselves. It only started in the 1700s with the Paris cafes. You went there, you make your pamphlet, which was your blog. Now we have blog, then you have pamphlets, more expensive because you to print them yourselves and give them to people. And you could go to jail for that, or even Russia, even in Russia in the 1900s. My last videos that I made for the studio are on the Russian roots of communism in the 1900s, and it was a tough time because all the intelligentsia had to go to the West in order not to end up in the gulags or the Tsar. But going back to our times, the reason why there is censorship now is because it is much, although still minimal statistically, there is quite a bit of flow of idea back and forth, and it's becoming, I hope, at least I hope, a little bit easier to have less conflict of ideas based on myths, on the myth that Stalin was bad, Hitler was bad, which was worse, one or the other. This doesn't get anywhere.
We're talking about the impossible task of drawing opinions of the ordinary citizenry, ordinary citizens, about their considering the success or the usefulness of their life as they're living it day to day, week to week.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you think there's a difference between back then and during Marx and the USSR and Russia today.
I do not know it. If I wish I could go, but I wish I could spend at least a month or something to have an idea of how. From what I read, from what we can see, and again the internet is very helpful, and I follow, there are quite a number of blogs in Russia that have subtitles in English, so I can see what they are talking about. I suspect, I may be wrong, because I can only see. I suspect that the current regime has understood that, one, you cannot do away with religion, because religion I'm not calling a myth in the negative sense. You know, it's a structure that comes back from the New Testament and the Orthodox Church. So the religion helps to cement some values which I think are very important, like the one of the family, and avoidance of measures that are really against the principles of religion, including, as you know, gay marriages are not allowed in the USSR, which doesn't mean that if you don't like gay marriages that you are against gays. No, everybody's free to do what they do.
Okay, now from my perception, we have been talking about the Soviet Union, USSR, and over 3 periods of time, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering now, what do you think about America in the same context in terms of censorship and the success or usefulness of being an American in a certain period of time since Columbus discovered America, and what's going on? I'm working my way to my bottom line here.
Sure.
Is what's going on in our system in America in terms of Trump, in terms of Obama, and in terms of the rightward leaning of the political establishment in America, and the same sort of consideration about during a more liberal regime in Washington, D.C. What's going on with America today? Is it worthwhile? How much censorship is there?
Well, the two separate subjects. That it exists censorship, there is.
Uh-huh.
Because censorship on the internet is also tied to the monopoly on the media. The media is under neoliberal or neoconservative control. It doesn't matter, because I don't see difference between neoliberals and neoconservatives. I see none. And so, in my view, and it's an unorthodox view, but I'm glad, because I don't have many followers of good. But there is no longer a great difference between right and left, and I find sometimes.
Is that because of the deep state?
Yes, because the deep state has created such a fracture between what is called the deep state and the rest of us, that the rest of us are still, quote unquote, I'm not, but the rest of us connected to the myths of right and left. What is people popular? What is elite? No, the deep state is the elite. Everyone else is like
Well, you say that again. You kind of muffled it. The deep state is the elite.
The state is the elite. The rest.
The elite.
Yes, and those are those who count. Those who create the censure on the internet. Those who establish the wars in the Middle East, the wars for Israel or whatever else. And the rest of us is still clinging to political myths which are now frankly obsolete.
Say a little more about the deep state from your learning.
Not learning, perception.
Perception,
well,
rather.
You measure the actors by the acts, right? So, censorship, as it showed up, is clearly an act of the deep state. It describes itself by the action. So, if they find it necessary to say that if I criticize it's hate speech, which is a horrible thing to say against the First Amendment, how do you define hate? I may say the guy is an SOB. Maybe he is an SOB, maybe he isn't, but it's not hate speech. Because the problem is where do you stop? So the very fact that there is pervasive censorship, which has not yet filtered in the consciousness of the people at large, but there is there, is the fact that the deep state sees danger in the propagation of an orthodox idea among people who are supposed to be sheep and nothing else.
Whoa, wow. People are supposed to be sheep and nothing else. And where'd that view come from? Where'd that appreciation of reality as you see it? Most people are sheep?
I count myself as one, although I'm not, because we have no power. The sheep usually follow the lead of the guard dog or whatever. And
so that's how it should be? Is it like the animal kingdom, so to speak?
No, because the fact that you still have, and will probably continue to have for a while, because there will be other technologies are being developed. From what I hear, I'm not sure. There are an alternative to the monopoly, to the Google and or the Facebook or whatever, and it will be a while before they take root, and they probably be a counter fight, but that will be an opportunity. But I'm not saying that people are sheep, but from the point of view of control, yes, if they were not sheep, they would not implement censorship.
We have been all over the place, and our time is almost up. And myth, freedom of speech, and censorship, well, you take a minute or so and reflect on the topic and what we covered or anything else that went on in our conversation in our hour together, and tell the viewers about it. Look at that camera. About that.
The camera. Well, because the subject is so vast, I called it myth because, as I mentioned, I suggest to use the word myth, because most of us still, although some people may not realize it, we live by our myths, and mythologists, as I like to say, is the song of man. It's song of the soul, rather. So we live with its myth. Some call it religion, some call it something else, but this is the myth. And so when, through changes in society or whatever other natural changes, there are cracks. In this case, there are cracks in the system, how it worked before, which in this case would be the expansion of ideas through different venues rather than the mainstream media. Then there is a bit of turmoil in society. The reaction of the deep state is to crush the development of free idea, and that's a situation that we find ourselves in now.
We have got to figure a way to overcome the deep state so that humankind...
That is why it reacts in that way.
All right, so, boy, we're running out of time so far. We had some plans about how to manage the ending of the show. But let's continue on and talk about public service announcements. All right. I want to tell you about getting Dr. Don's shows on the web. Google Don Baham, YouTube. There's a bunch of shows on there. You can see what's going on. You can also tell others to watch Dr. Don's shows on the internet anytime at my website, www.donbaham.com. And now I want to talk to you about humanists and humanism. Humanists believe in a scientific rather than a supernatural or divine explanation for how we, all plants, animals, planets, stars, galaxies, got to where we are today. Humanists believe that it is our purpose to become our very best selves, take care of each other, take good care of this earth. Humans act this way not to earn some eternal reward or to avoid some eternal punishment, but because it's the right thing to do. Yeah. Now I want to tell you about the Alliance for Democracy. Yeah, one of my favorite organizations I belong to. You can go to the national website and the Portland, Oregon website. The Alliance for Democracy is a national grassroots progressive populist organization founded in 1996 to challenge the power of large corporations. Overall, the Alliance for Democracy seeks to establish true political democracy and a just society with a sustainable, equitable economy. Now, what do I have left? Oh my God, the American Civil Liberties Union without the ACLU. I don't know where we'd be without civil liberties. The ACLU is our nation's prime guardian of our liberty. The ACLU works daily in courts, legislatures, and communities to defend and preserve the individual rights and liberties guaranteed to every person in this country by the Constitution and laws of the United States. The ACLU's job is to conserve America's original civic values as stated in our Constitution and in the Bill of Rights. Oh boy, we got to learn to end corporate personhood. Yeah. Go to movetoamend.org. Since the Supreme Court in March 2009 announced their decision that corporations are to be recognized as persons with the same constitutional rights as real human beings, tens of thousands of outraged citizens throughout the country have realized the need to amend the U.S. Constitution so that it clearly specifies that personhood rights shall be granted to only real flesh and blood persons and not to corporations, and that money is not speech. They have signed various move to amend petitions circulated in their areas to express their sentiments to their government representatives. Please join this movement. Please join this movement now to take back our country from the grasp of the corporatocracy or the deep state and save this beautiful experiment in democracy called the United States of America. Thanks for watching. So glad you watched this. And remember KFC? Not that KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you too. And you too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.